Today we enter the divisional round of the NFL playoffs, which means there are exactly 7 more games to pick. 4 this weekend, 2 next weekend, and in 2 weeks, we'll pick the Super Bowl. So 2-4 through wildcard weekend, not the best. It would have been 3-3 if I picked with my brain and not my heart. I think that was probably fairly evident in the Steelers-Bills game. I laid out the case that the Bills should win it and then pick the Steelers, because why not pick the team that you root for in the playoffs? But chosen to win, sticking with that 2-4 record, and now we have 8 teams that remain. The first matchup features a Week 1 rematch of the Texans visiting the Ravens. So these teams, as I mentioned, faced off in Week 1. The Ravens beat the Texans 25-9. That sounds like it wasn't a close game. If you watched it, it was actually relatively close, and of course that was CJ Stroud's first start. These teams are notably different since then, so I'm not putting much stock into that. What I am putting some stock into are the injuries. Mark Andrews is not expected to play. I think that's a fairly significant deal. Tylan Wallace is out. That is Baltimore's kick returner, punt returner, so maybe a little less splash on special teams. And then finally, Marlon Humphrey's out. Nico Collins has been on a tear lately, so I'm curious if that's going to have a major impact, missing their number 1 corner. The Texans are relatively healthy. Obviously, the Tank Dell injury weeks back, he's not going to be playing, he's out for the year. But as far as players that have been starting for the last couple of weeks, they're going into this game in a pretty good spot. Now, as always when it comes to the divisional round, we'll have 2 teams that are coming off a bye, and in this case, both of those teams, both the Ravens and the 49ers, rested their starters in Week 18 as well, so they're coming into this game on 2 weeks of rest, and while that's a plus, their opponents both have played essentially multiple playoff games to get to this point. Both the Packers and the Texans had to win in Week 18, and then even the Packers had to get some help to get into the playoffs in the first place, so there's a potential for the number 1 seed to, maybe be a little bit rusty, to be caught flat-footed, and for this game, I don't think that's going to be too big of a factor. The Ravens have actually had this happen before versus the Tennessee Titans the last time they were the number 1 seed. They came out kind of flat. They really weren't playing inspired. They weren't matching the intensity level, the physicality of the Titans. I think John Harbaugh will have learned from that, and I think they'll come out a much more prepared physical team for this matchup. Now, for all these playoff games, I've been kind of giving a scenario for each team in which I think gives them the best chance to win. I think in this one it's actually the same for both teams. I think it's as simple as winning the turnover battle and converting in the red zone. Now, that's going to be the case in like 99% of games, but I look at one particular matchup. It was the Ravens visiting the 49ers a couple of weeks back, and the Ravens really took it to the Niners. They're the only team that have done that since the 3-game losing streak the Niners went on in the middle of the season. Obviously, DeMeco Ryans, former 49ers defensive coordinator, Bobby Slowick was on that staff as well. This Texans team kind of exists in the mold of what the 49ers have built out there in San Francisco. The Ravens won the turnover battle hugely in that game, and I think if the Texans can take care of the ball, they can stay in this. I think they'll be able to move the ball on the Ravens defense. There have been very few teams that have really slowed down CJ Stroud to a significant degree. I think the Ravens defense will have some wrinkles. I think there's going to be some confusion, but maybe after a couple of drives, settling into kind of the flow of the game, I think Stroud's going to move the ball up and down the field. But I also think Lamar Jackson and that new look Ravens offense is going to do the same. So whichever team takes care of the ball better, and whichever team can convert those red zone possessions into touchdowns, that's going to be the winner in this one. So who do I pick in a game like this? It's a tough decision, and that Marlon Humphrey injury, I think Nico Collins is going to have a huge day, and frankly, he's going to need to for the Texans to have a chance. But the Ravens have beaten more winning teams this year than any team in the history of the NFL, and they've done so often at M&T Bank Stadium. They've blown out really good teams, so I don't think this will be a blowout. I think it's a back and forth game, but I think there's going to be just maybe one stop by the Ravens defense that makes the difference in this one. I gotta say, I have a hard time picking against CJ Stroud right now. He has played some unbelievable ball as a rookie, but I hate to do it, but I think I'm picking the just about fairy tale run to come to an end in the divisional round in the AFC. So we spoke about the 49ers moving to the 8:15 Eastern kickoff game tonight, the Packers visiting those 49ers. So one thing that I think I should note right off the bat, the Packers are the exact type of team that can beat the Niners. Look back at the 49ers losses this year. I'm going to rule out the one against Cleveland because they had a potential game-winning field goal missed in that one. They lost to Joe Burrow and the Bengals. They moved the ball up and down the field, intermediate passes, precision and efficiency from Joe Burrow was what allowed them to be so dominant against that Niners team. The following week, they lost to Kirk Cousins and the Vikings. It was big plays in the passing game. There was that play where Jordan Addison ripped the ball away from the defender just before halftime and took it all the way to the end zone. Jordan Love, I've been saying this since like week 2. He's willing to go down the field. He's an accurate passer. They can do this. I'm not saying I'm picking them, but this 7 seed versus a 1 seed, I would not say by any stretch that it's a given the Niners are winning this. So a really interesting factoid here. Both teams are relatively healthy, first of all, but Matt LaFleur and Kyle Shanahan have now met 5 times, including playoffs. Shanahan is 3-2. However, he's 2-0 in the playoffs. So this will be the first time they match up without Aaron Rodgers at the helm for Green Bay, and actually the first time that the Packers will see Brock Purdy. Joe Barry, the Packers defensive coordinator, he has had an up and down season. In the middle of the year, fans were clamoring for him to be fired, the defense was looking super suspect, and lately they've really come on and played quite well. This Niners offense, though, is a different animal. I mean, the weapons they have, whether it's Christian McCaffrey, whether it's Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk has really come on. Obviously, George Kittle is there. There's so much to defend. I think that's really going to put a lot of stress on the Packers defense. If the Niners can do what Dallas didn't and get out to a bit of a lead, I do think the Packers are going to be in trouble in this one. So one thing that I did look at were the home-away splits for both teams, and really nothing stood out to me. The Niners lost several games at home. They were able to win big on the road. The Packers were, I think, 5-5, including playoffs on the road. So I'm not sure there's much to be gleaned from that. But if you're the 49ers, you've had 2 weeks of rest. You're the home team. You're supposed to win this game. And as far as scenarios go, I think it's the exact same recipe for the 49ers this week as it was for Dallas last week. Get an early lead, force the Packers to become one-dimensional, and I think they're going to be in good shape. The way that the Packers were able to control that game against Dallas in the wildcard round, while Jordan Love played incredibly, it was through the run. Aaron Jones had 3 touchdowns. He always plays well against Dallas, but that was an exceptional performance. I think it's going to be tougher sledding running against this 49ers defense. They're a bigger group. They're a more physical group. I don't think the holes are going to be there in the same capacity as they were for Aaron Jones. So I think the recipe for the Niners is that simple. Get a lead, make them one-dimensional, force them to abandon the run, and they'll be heading to yet another NFC Championship game. And unsurprisingly for the Packers, it's just the opposite. Stay patient with the run. Commit to the run. You cannot become one-dimensional in this game. It's just not the game you want to play against this 49ers defense. Letting Nick Bosa and Chase Young just pin their ears back and rush the passer time after time after time, it's going to lead to disaster. It's going to lead to turnovers. They have to commit to the run. They have to stick with it. And I think they're going to have to establish a short passing game, almost a West Coast-like offense, because I do think the run is going to struggle to get going. So maybe set up the run through the pass, maybe use the short passing game as a de facto run game. They have to stay on schedule. They can't get behind the chains. When you're a playoff underdog, you're going to need some things to go right. But if they can do that, if they can establish the run game, if they can stay on schedule through the short passing game, they can take those deep and intermediate shots to get chunk plays, and they can have a chance to pull off the upset. All of that said, as far as picking the recipe for which team that I think is more likely to happen, I'm going to go with the 49ers to win this game. Not only because they've had better playoff success against the Packers and at least this same coaching staff, different quarterback, very different team, they won't really go into it as intimidated as maybe a Packers team that has a lot of guys that have lost to this 49ers team in the playoffs before. But when I look at it, it's kind of the same case as the Buccaneers and Eagles game last week. I think the path to victory for the Niners is just simpler, and I'm going to pick them to win. Not only that, I do think they're the better team, and they've been on a mission to get back here. after losing Brock Purdy last year, like the first drive of the championship game, they're on a mission to get back, and I think they're going to do it. So moving to the Sunday games, we have a 3 o'clock Eastern Time kickoff, Buccaneers visiting the Lions. I'm kind of glad this is the early game because I am so excited to watch this one. It should be a really good game. So as far as health is concerned, Khalif Raymond of the Lions is out. Sam Laporta is questionable, but he played last week. I have every confidence he's going to play this week. And there's some other questionable players for both teams, but nothing hugely impactful. Otherwise, teams are in pretty good health, which is what you want to see in the playoffs. So going back to week 5, the Lions were able to defeat the Buccaneers pretty handily 20-6. Again, early in the season, does it really matter that much? Some stuff that maybe teams can pick up on tendencies and all that from playing them once, and there's perhaps a degree of physicality that you know is coming. That Lions offensive line is one thing I think of. The Bucs defensive line will know what to expect out of them now. But the Buccaneers, I think, were even the more different team then than the Lions. The Bucs at that stage of the season were still trying to be a run team. Todd Bowles was trying to be a defensive run-first team that controlled the line of scrimmage and won low-scoring games. They've since kind of relied on the right arm of Baker Mayfield, and it's really opened things up. They have trouble running the ball, and the Lions defense is a good run defense. But they're a very suspect pass defense, as is the Buccaneers defense. The Bucs will actually overplay the run, if anything, and give up big plays in the passing game. So not only am I looking forward to this game because of the stories for both teams and both quarterbacks, I think this could be an offensive fireworks show. So that then begs the question, which team is going to set off more fireworks? And I think, if we were to lay out a scenario, turnover battle and red zone conversions, as I said before, in 99% of games, that's going to be big. But I'm going to go a different direction with this. Whose defense steps up? Whose defense makes a play? Whether it's jarring the ball loose, maybe it's forcing a fumble on what would otherwise be a big play, maybe it's an interception. The secondaries are going to be a big part in this. It may be a big part getting burnt generally, but I think both teams are going to give up yards and they're going to give up points. They'll have to stay focused, they'll have to try to keep everything in front of them, and who can make that one big play to maybe change the tide? I really do look at this game as kind of being the same recipe for both teams, and I think that should make for a very good game. So, when I look at the matchup, first of all, Detroit being the home team, obviously that is an advantage that goes in their favor. Per multiple Rams players that visited Detroit last week for the wildcard game, Ford Field was one of, if not the loudest places they've ever played. This fan base is hungry for playoff success, and I think it's only going to be louder the further this goes on. There's a chance if the Packers upset the Niners tonight, Detroit would be the host of the NFC Championship game should they win this one. The fans will know that, the players will know that, that place will be rocking if that's the case. But I think even without that, I just like the Lions matchup in this. Even though I mentioned the Buccaneers defense will have that tendency to overplay the run and really make the Lions beat them through the pass, I think the Lions are going to be able to establish some degree of running game. David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs, they've been such a great tandem this year. I think they'll even unleash Gibbs a little bit more in this one. And because I think the Lions are going to be able to do that, they'll be able to dictate the flow of the game, they'll be able to control the clock just a little bit more. It's still going to be big plays from both sides. But I think that ability to run the ball maybe buys them an extra possession or two and cuts down on what Tampa can get. And I think their run, which nobody saw coming, nobody thought that Tampa was going to be in the divisional round of the playoffs this year with Baker Mayfield coming in, I think on like a $4 million salary. But I think this is where it ends for them. I like the Lions going to the NFC Championship game for the first time in over 30 years. And finally, moving to the 6:30 p.m. Eastern kickoff, the Chiefs visiting the Bills. This has become a bit of a rivalry as of late, and now these two quarterbacks, Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, have an even 3-3 record against each other in the 6 games they've played. The Bills have won 3 of the last 5. Both of those losses in the last 5 games came in the playoffs. Another interesting thing, of the last 5 matchups, they were all in Kansas City. Now, the 2 playoff ones, obviously KC being the higher seed, that was the reasoning for those 2, but even the 3 regular season games all falling in KC is really interesting, and despite that, the Bills won all those regular season games in Arrowhead. So I think that's a big deal. The Bills won't be intimidated by that atmosphere. They won't be intimidated by the team. They know they match up. They already beat them earlier this year. That was, by the way, the Kadarius Toney offsides game, if you've since forgotten. So just a little bit of added drama. I can only imagine we're going to hear about the refs pregame. So injuries-wise, the Chiefs are without Sky Moore. Otherwise, they're generally pretty healthy. The Bills have a laundry list of injuries. Current guys like Christian Benford, Taylor Rapp, Gabe Davis, Balin Spector all out this week. And of course, going back to Matt Milano, Tre'Davious White, they've had so many injuries this year, and to even get to this point is incredibly impressive. So the earlier matchup this season, I think was recent enough, it was only on December 10th, that it maybe can help us kind of understand what's going to happen in this game. And to sum it up in just a couple of sentences, the Bills jumped out to a lead early. It looked like they may just roll over the Chiefs, and then the Chiefs defense stepped up, and they really held Josh Allen and that Bills offense in check for much of the game. Ultimately, the Bills would win 20-17 after the Chiefs really couldn't get anything going. They had that incredible play by Travis Kelce. He had the long catch, lateral to Kadarius Toney. He takes it into the end zone, and he was called for offensive offsides. The correct call, by the way, but I think there was just so much going on in that moment, the Chiefs couldn't recover from it. So what do I think is important from that game that goes to this game? Basically two things. I think one, the Bills have learned they have to keep their foot on the pedal. If they get up in this game, they cannot let up. They can't let the Chiefs hang around and claw their way back into it. Because if not for Kadarius Toney being a couple of feet too far forward, they may well have lost that game. Now, there is still time left after the play happened. Maybe the Bills can go down and retake the lead if that play stands, but who knows? I think they kind of learned their lesson from that. The Chiefs, on the other hand, for one, I can only imagine they are working on fundamentals and alignment and all that stuff this week, because clearly it was important in the last game, and they've been working on it from that time, without a doubt. The other side of it, though, Steve Spagnuolo may have discovered something for how to keep Josh Allen and that Bills offense in check. I think this will be more of a defensive game maybe than expected. There was the game less than 2 years ago, the end of the 2021 season. It was early 2022. 42-36 Chiefs in overtime. That was the 13-second game. I don't think this is going to be nearly like that. I think there's going to be maybe half that amount of total points scored. I think the defenses are going to play a big factor. And with the Bills defense being so banged up, can they do enough to hold Patrick Mahomes in check? Picking against Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs seems unwise. He's 10-2. His only 2 losses came to Tom Brady. And obviously, if there was ever one other person to not pick against in the playoffs, it was Brady. So I think, reasonably you look at this, it is Patrick Mahomes' first away playoff game, which is wild, but it's just so hard to pick against Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. You got to pick one upset. There's one of these games is going to turn out not chalk. I'm picking the Bills. It feels like more so this year than maybe any other year, it's the Bills' year. I don't even love it, but I just think they've both these teams have figured out how to play the other, for sure. It's almost certainly going to be a close game. But I like the Bills. It's at home. This is their best chance to knock out the Chiefs in the playoffs and go to the AFC Championship game. I think they do it. I think they're finally going to slay that Chiefs dragon in the playoffs, and we'll see Josh Allen in the championship game. I'm picking the Bills, and I'm going to live with it if Patrick Mahomes makes me eat my words. So, I don't know if we need to recap 4 games, but we'll do it anyway. I'm taking the Ravens to beat the Texans, that 4:30 Eastern kickoff game today. I think it'll be a good one, but I like the Ravens to end that incredible Texans run. I like the 49ers to get it done against the Packers tonight. Taking the Lions to be the Niners' opponent in the NFC Championship game, getting the win over the Buccaneers. And finally, taking the Bills to get that win and finally beat the Chiefs in the playoffs. That's going to do it for this one. Enjoy the games. Let me know who you got. There's only 4 games left. Give me your winners for all the games in the comments below. Thank you for watching. Enjoy the games, and I'll see you next time.